Hello and welcome to it. This is #Africa. I'm Tutuzile Ramela. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be taking a comprehensive look at stories that dominated headlines around the continent. Around 5 million people in Burundi have voted in a constitutional referendum. President Pierre Nkurunziza wants to change the law to allow him to remain in power until 2034. Opposition parties say the vote is rigged. The president's 2015 run saw thousands of people being killed and hundreds of thousands fleeing the country. Former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh is being accused of ordering the killing of more than 50 West Africans in 2005. The migrants were arrested on a beach in the Gambia while trying to reach Europe. It was suspected that they were mercenaries trying to overthrow Jammeh. It's alleged his subordinates then destroyed evidence to cover up the act. And Malawians are calling for the death penalty to deter attacks on people living with albinism. 22 people with the condition have been murdered in the last 4 years. They are targeted for their body parts, which can be used in ritual ceremonies. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa says it respects South Africa's plans to follow its parliamentary processes before signing the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. President Cyril Ramaphosa signed a declaration of intent in March. The initiative is aimed at boosting intra-Africa trade by scrapping duties on 90% of traded products. Here's Devin Murugan with more.
Delegates are hoping that by the end of this two-day ministerial meeting, at least 10 countries will have ratified the Africa Free Trade Agreement. In March, 44 countries, including South Africa, signed an agreement to establish a continental free trade area. The big payoff is economic development, as countries build up their exports and create jobs in their respective markets. And there's 1.2 billion people to cover in an economy worth $2.5 trillion. But only 18% of Africa's trade is done within the continent. Some countries are concerned that cheap goods will be dumped from other countries. Not to worry, says one expert.
When you open up and you are giving more opportunities to your businesses, you're actually expanding your fiscal space, your tax base. And it's no longer the norm in the 21st century for governments to depend on import duties for revenues. They normally should depend on corporate taxes, income taxes, VAT.
Ghana and regional powerhouse Kenya have already ratified the agreement, while South Africa hasn't sent a ministerial delegation to this conference.
I think that what President Ramaphosa did was exactly right. He had not had the adequate consultations. They need to go through Parliament, they need to discuss it. And so he said, I'll sign the Kigali Declaration, which means, as South Africa, we believe in the future of this, but we need to do the right processes. So that was a particularly important signal because it shows us that a large economy is in agreement.
Inefficient border controls, corruption, and poor infrastructure remain the biggest barriers to flowing cross-border trade in Africa. For a free trade area and intra-Africa trade to flourish and be sustainable, industrializing economies remain pivotal. Delegates here understand that they have to let go of fears of dumping and losses in customs revenue and realize the long-term benefits of partnerships. Devin Murugan, Addis Ababa.
While more countries are edging closer to ratifying the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, this week Ghana and East African powerhouse Kenya ratified the agreement. It'll see 90% of goods traded between African countries become zero-rated. I'm joined in studio by ENCA's business anchor Devin Murugan, who was at a United Nations conference in Addis Ababa this week where the trade protocol was discussed. Thank you so much for joining us. If we can start with some of the plans that were discussed to make this a reality, David.
Yes, indeed. Let's just take a look at the context to see why this trade deal has come up. And essentially, it's aimed at getting African countries to trade with each other a little more. Some of the figures are quite startling. Out of all the export and trade we do as a continent, only 18% of that trade is done within African borders. And the problem with that is that so much of the money leaves the continent. So this trade area or trade agreement is aimed at actually getting African countries to trade more. There's 1.2 billion people in this market. Of course, one of the experts, or most of the experts, say that if this trade area gets underway, it could bring in billions and keep the money into the continent.
Kenya and Ghana taking the lead. Where does South Africa stand and other countries in making this a reality?
Yes, it was quite ceremonious, the fact that these two big economies this week at this conference in Addis Ababa actually what they call ratified the agreement. Remember that we have 44 countries in March. This was quite a big conference in Kigali in Rwanda that signed up and says, we like the idea, our intent is there, we will join this free trade area. This week, as you mentioned, two big countries ratifying the deal. That is Kenya and Ghana. As far as South Africa is concerned, there are parliamentary processes that each country goes back to the constituencies and say, listen guys, this is what we are up against, how will this affect our local economy? It's understood that South Africa will sign this agreement possibly in July, but those parliamentary processes still need to go underway. I just want to set back also just some context as to why we do this sort of things. The main idea behind this is to get economies to build up their industries. And if that trade agreement unfolds, you will have markets outside your borders, but of course in neighboring countries, not elsewhere in Europe or America, for example. And if those markets flourish or the demand flourishes, then of course back home, your manufacturers and many of the resource-based companies get a boost because there is a demand market out there. The difference being it's within the African continent.
Right. Each and every single country has got matters that they are grappling with, South Africa not being an exception to this. So how do you see that playing out in terms of achieving this one Africa market?
Well, that's exactly what's up for discussion. I mean, different countries have their sort of respective challenges when considering whether or not they want to jump on this protocol. A simple example would be customs duties. You take these small countries like Swaziland, Lesotho, they actually generate a lot of income from those customs border posts, for example. If you put tariffs or zero-rate tariffs on 90% of your goods, what happens? The amount of money you collect on your customs actually just diminishes. But there is a good side to that, and some of the experts say that might be a sort of short-term regret, if you like, but the long-term advantage of this is the fact that industries within these economies start to develop, and you might get your revenue from those manufacturers, those businesses, which will far outweigh any of the losses you have on the customs side.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you very much for coming through to talk to us about that. ENCA's business anchor, Devon Murugan. Do stay with us after the break. Even a crocodile attack can't stop a love affair. Find out why after the break. Welcome back. African countries and global health organizations are getting together to combat an outbreak of Ebola in a remote part of the Northwestern Democratic Republic of Congo. This in an effort to prevent the disease from spreading.
The Nigerian Immigration Service is using thermometers to monitor some entrants into the country since the deadly Ebola virus last hit the region. Screening had to be stepped up since the latest outbreak in the DRC. The current outbreak in the northwest of the Democratic Republic of the Congo instantly brings to mind the horror of the previous epidemic. It took 11,000 lives and infected 28,000 people across West Africa between 2014 and 2016.
We are ready to support the DRC should the outbreak escalate. You will note that Nigeria had the largest, in addition to containing the outbreak in Nigeria, we deployed the largest number of health experts to support Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia during the last outbreak. So we have a whole cohort of Nigerians that have been trained, that have participated in an outbreak of this nature in the past, that are ready, able, and willing to be deployed in subsequent outbreaks across the continent.
The World Health Organization says a total of 39 Ebola cases have been reported in the DRC, including 19 deaths in the past 4 weeks. It's trying to deploy experimental vaccines to the affected area, but they need cold storage in the equatorial region.
We have agreement, registration, plus import permit, everything formally agreed already. And as you know, that vaccine is safe and efficacious and has been already tested. So I think we can, it's all is being prepared, all is ready now to really use it. We have already moved cold chain equipment yesterday, it arrived yesterday. And in the next few days, we will start moving, after we install the cold chain, moving the vaccines.
The remote region where the outbreak is taking place can only be accessed by motorbike or by helicopter.
A quick look now at what's been trending on social media this week. Spanish champions Barcelona went head-to-head with PSL champions Mamelodi Sundowns. Supporters filled the FNB Stadium in Johannesburg to watch their favorite team battle it out against the likes of Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez. The Spanish side were easy 3-1 winners on the night, but local fans were not too upset by the result as they got to witness some of the world's best footballers up close and personal for the first time since the 2010 World Cup. 2 Kenyan men have been sentenced to 1 month in jail for fighting with a kiosk owner over their failure to pay a bill of just 16 rand. The men are said to have been angry after the kiosk owner refused to serve them green pepper. The owner says they followed him into the kitchen where they threatened to stab him. And Zambian musician and activist Fumba Chama has been arrested after returning from self-imposed exile in South Africa. He fled the country in January after receiving death threats over his anti-corruption song Rat in the Pot. Rights groups are condemning his arrest, saying he's not a criminal. Now, as the saying goes, love conquers all. Not just any love, but a love that not even a vicious crocodile attack could stop. This is how one Zimbabwean bride and her British man got married despite the odds.
In a rare story of love conquers all. What started out as a canoeing trip on the Zambezi River in northern Zimbabwe soon turned into a tragedy after a crocodile ripped off the arm of 25-year-old Zanele Ndlovu. Ndlovu and her British fiancé were on an expedition just days before their wedding when a crocodile attacked them and punctured their inflatable boat. The couple was pulled out of the water by tour guides. And Ndlovu, who had been badly injured, was airlifted to Bulawayo Hospital.
Well, firstly, I was just pushing and kicking and trying to fight the croc as much as I could. And eventually, one of the tour guides managed to pull me out of the water and get me onto one of their canoes. And then when I was safe, then they got him out of the water into another canoe.
Unfortunately, doctors had to amputate Ndlovu's shattered arm. But this did not stop the couple from getting married. They said their I do's at a chapel at the hospital 5 days after the attack.
We'd actually planned to have the wedding at an outdoor venue here in Bulawayo. Obviously the doctors said they could accommodate to have our wedding at the hospital chapel. And it was decorated beautifully. We had a great day.
Yeah.
After the ceremony, all the rest of the guests went to the venue and celebrated on our behalf. And the two of us stayed at the hospital for the rest of the day. And that was really nice. We had the rest of the day just to ourselves. It's quite nice to have an intimate wedding day together.
The couple who met 2 years ago in Zimbabwe now plan to move to Britain, where they plan to settle.
Bless them. And that's it from us for now. Remember, you can also catch up on #Africa episodes on ENCA's YouTube channel, where you'll find the #Africa playlist. And that's it from us for now. Do stay tuned to ENCA for all the latest news. Take care and goodbye.